Afternoon, everyone. It's 12 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and start this Friday's legislative webinar. I think almost everybody on here that I can see, even by names, is old hat at this, but just in case, please remember to keep your microphone muted. It will help us with background noise. If you've not already done so, please identify yourself by your name, position if you'd like, but at least the organization that you represent. Remember, this is a public space. All are welcome and all are able to listen in. We will take questions at the end, but know that we will take questions from city members before we would go out to the general public. And as always, you can follow all of our activities from our bulletin, which should be going out later this afternoon, as well as looking at the legislative webpage at www.orcities.org.com. And we will make sure the webinar ends no later than 1 p.m. So today we've got a pretty decent slate with a broad variety of topics. We're going to talk about the resumption of Senate floor hearings, House Bill 3414, which is actually the governor's housing bill. We'll talk about shelter funding, House Bill 2005, which deals with gun regulations, House Bill 3013, which is related to pharmacy subsidies, broadband, and with the broadband, given the news that dropped this morning about the cyber attack, we will talk about that as well. House Bill 3220, which deals with electronic recycling, and House Bill 2010. We'll finish with that House bill, which is related to the drought package. So we're going to start with our legislative director, Jim McCauley. Jim, thanks for coming online. Jim, Senate's back having floor sessions. What can you tell us about why they came back, how it could impact cities, and where we think this is going to leave us as we wind down session?
Right. Thanks very much, Patty. Afternoon, everybody. We hit 42 days with the walkout this time around. The Senate, I think, as everybody knows, requires a 2/3 standard to be able to have a floor session. So Oregon is one of only 4 states in the country that has that kind of a higher standard as opposed to just a simple majority, which effectively is 50+1. So 4 members of the Senate Republican caucus were in the building yesterday and were on the floor. Today there were 5. We'll see how this goes forward, but they effectively reached an agreement. So the 2 bills that were really the focus of the walkout were House Bill 2002, that's the reproductive health care, as well as gender affirming care bill, and then House Bill 2005, gun safety legislation. Both of those bills have been amended significantly from their original form, and both actually moved off the Senate floor yesterday and are going to be reconsidered by the House next week. So those are really the 2 key pieces. There's also a House as well as a Senate joint resolution, both of which may be amended and may move through the process as well. But at this point, there may not be enough time to address both of them. So that's really kind of where we're at this point in time. And we've got roughly less than a week that remains of our session. Statutory sine die is the 25th. So that is the end of next week. There will be no floor sessions this weekend. So they're going to resume business actually on Tuesday after the Juneteenth, celebration, as well as legal holiday in the state. So they have been suspending rules, which means we're not having to read read legislation. And we expect suspension of rules to continue going forward and able to go through the type of bill stack that we have at this point in time. So because we're not quite sure what this is going to look like next week, we don't know if, for example, only 4 or 5 Republicans are going to continue to show up for floor votes, or if there are other agreements that went beyond the key pieces of legislation that kept the Republicans from coming back in for floor sessions. So some of the legislation that still remains includes controversial bills, some of which we are trying to stop. So, and in order to stop those, we will need to have a full complement of Republicans showing up on the Senate floor to at least be able to have that balance with that voting process. So we're going to learn more about that probably over the next few days and as we get into Tuesday of next week. So that is going to be one of those unknowns that we're not really going to know until we physically say, or until we're physically there. I think for the remaining week of session, stay tuned for action alerts, stay connected to your legislators, and you're going to get a snapshot of at least the hot items today that remain in play for the remainder of the session, because there are still key priorities that your government affairs team is working on going forward.
Jim, what's the likelihood they get through the full bill stack before sine die?
So yesterday they blew through probably 75, almost 100 in an afternoon. So as soon as you suspend rules with having to read as well as do second and third readings and things of that nature, they can actually go through a bill stack really quick. And my expectation is that when they come back in on Tuesday, there will be sessions that will start in the morning. They'll go into the afternoon and evenings, and they're going to do everything possible, I think, to get through some of those key pieces of legislation. There was roughly 400 bills that were in that bill stack, and those include a lot of agency budgets, which actually moved through the process today off the Senate side. So they've got the ability to do it. It's just a matter of whether or not there'll be agreement from both caucuses on suspension of rules and being able to do that.
And then one last question, Jim. Earlier on, when the walkout first happened, there was conversations around a potential special session. Does that still seem likely now that we're back to having floor votes, or is that still unknown?
I think that's still a little bit unknown. If they're unable to, we'll say, hit some key pieces or complete some key pieces of legislation for whatever reason, there may still be a opportunity to have a special session to just maybe make it a specific to one particular bill or one particular type of legislation, but we're not going to know what that looks like until next week.
Thanks, Jim. And Jim mentioned that there's still a bunch of critical bills that we're tracking, one of which, and probably one of the ones that we've been giving the most attention to, is the governor's housing bill. Ariel, if you're online, there you are. Thanks, Ariel. So Ariel, you're our land use and housing lobbyist. You've had a busy session, and I know you've briefed us before on the governor's housing bill, which I think is now at, and I don't even remember what amendment number we're at, but there's been a lot of work on this. Where does it stand now, and what, if anything, is changing, and what should cities know?
Thanks, Patty. So House Bill 3414 is still a work in progress. We are on the -21. We have 21 amendments at this point and potentially growing. At this stage, our negotiations from LSC have pretty much hit the end of the road. We've been able to get some technical improvements in the last couple of rounds of amendments. We've seen some additional improvements come forward in what's the -20. Not everything that we asked for some reason, but still important improvements for having a hope of implementing the bill, which, as a reminder, contains several parts. The first part requires all cities to provide adjustments if requested by housing developers for certain siting and design standards. And then there's a section in the bill that talks about how those adjustments can be appealed and how that works. And then the bill stands up what's called the Housing Accountability and Production Office, which will be a resource and investigatory office between DLCD and the Building Codes Division, where they can receive complaints or proactive requests from cities to update codes and processes. They do have some enforcement abilities, and that office will also have $10 million in local technical assistance grants to both support cities that request assistance, as well as if that office is in a position of enforcing and needed to update in a city, that there would be funding to actually support that work. In the most recent update to the bill is that I think it was last week, lost track of time, they added in what's been called land supply, which is essentially a UGB expansion process that is kind of a fast track if a city meets certain criteria. And that pathway, that process can be requested by a property owner, developer, or the city, but it's entirely optional. The city can say no if it does not want to bring in land to the UGB at the request of a property owner. And then in order to do that and to access that process, the city and the developer would have to put together a concept plan and meet certain density and affordability metrics to qualify. And not all cities are going to have land that meets the criteria. So that is, as you can imagine, very controversial. At the last hearing, when this concept was included into the bill or posted as an option, the league was supportive of the land use piece as an optional tool for cities. Supply is an issue for a number of our members, but we are not supporting the other parts of the bill, although we are at this point neutral in recognition of the significant changes to the initial structure of the adjustment portion of the bill that we were able to gain in large part thanks to the advocacy of Representative Gamba, a former mayor, and other legislators that we very much appreciate. So looking ahead, we expect to see the bill and either the -20 amendments, and there may be a technical change that didn't make it into the 20 amendments coming in at -22. That could move out of the Rules Committee this coming next week. And then there's also a -21 amendment that was a big surprise to a lot of folks, which only contains the housing office portion of the bill and that technical assistance funding. So that's a really interesting development. We'll be watching it closely to see what the committee decides to move forward next week, whether it's the full adjustment housing office land supply package or just the office. There will not be a public hearing that we're expecting, so we won't be changing a position or having an opportunity to do that or testifying in any way. And we're kind of just in a waiting and holding pattern to kind of see what moves forward. Our understanding is that the votes on this bill have not been certain. And that is in large part, we understand based on what we're hearing due to frustrations with a lack of process and communication with legislators. And certainly as a city representative, we can share that it has not been an ideal process. It's not the process we're used to seeing from the legislature, particularly when it's related to really complex policy and such impactful changes like being proposed in 3414.
Ariel, so you said that the votes aren't certain. Is this an opportunity for our members to be reaching out to the legislators to reinforce that there are strong concerns about portions of at least the -20 amendments?
Yes, I think that is a good opportunity. And also, even if you haven't taken a position, another option is to just check in and see if they have any questions for you, that kind of a thing. There's going to be a lot of floor votes coming up this next week, and hopefully your legislators are reaching out. But if they haven't, just generally, it's a good time to be in touch and let them know that you're available if they have questions on any bills that impact cities.
And on the surprise -21, if it's just essentially providing funding for technical assistance, that would be a good amendment to be supportive of. Is that fair?
Yes, but know that it also sets up this office, which does create kind of a new investigatory complaint receiving authority at DLCD. They are going to put out some guidance and some parameters and work with LOC and AOC on kind of standing up that office, but it will be a new kind of enforcement arm that cities will be responding to. So it's kind of good and bad. Just speaking personally, I have to feel that I just personally believe that if and when the state starts to kind of respond to complaints and start to investigate them, I think they're going to find largely that cities are doing the best they can and are doing their jobs, and that there are good reasons, good and bad, frustrating or helpful for, why things are happening the way that they are. And I'm hoping that's really going to shed a light on what the true barriers to housing development are, which, infrastructure, workforce, environmental barriers, protections, which we, support, but, cause issues and timelines, that there are state-driven requirements that cities are currently being blamed for implementing. So I think that even though it's coming from kind of an accountability perspective, I think that it's going to be an important resource. So that's how I've been talking about it with legislators, and we've been conceptually supportive of the office. Again, I think there's room for improvement in how it's portrayed and how it's stood up, but I think that we have the opportunity to help stand up an office with DLCD and building codes that really is a true resource for both cities and developers.
Okay. Thanks for that update on the housing bill, Ariel. I'm going to ask you to stay online though. And can you give us a status on where we stand with shelter funding?
Sure. So that's going to be in the end of session budgets that we're looking really closely. And I really wanted to just make sure folks were aware. So, when we're talking about shelter funding, there's a couple different buckets. There's the funding that already passed in kind of that early session Bill 5019, which was really about implementing the governor's emergency declaration. And it allocated money specifically to expand shelter capacity and do additional rapid rehousing for unchildren Oregonians. And so there's a great deal of work happening to implement that I'll talk about in just a second, just to make sure folks are aware. And then there's the funding for the general biennium for 2023 to 2025 that's largely going to go through Oregon Housing and Community Services, OHCS, the state housing agency. So we've seen that budget kind of move forward in committee, and there is some funding there, but we're hoping to see additional funding in some of the end of session bills, whether that's known as the Christmas tree bill or the program change bill. So we're hoping to see additional, particularly operations dollars to fill gaps in existing shelters. And so we'll be looking to see kind of everything that comes out, because that's really going to be important for any community that's currently providing any type of shelter or homeless response efforts. So we'll be watching that closely. And I saw a question in the chat. Do we know what's in the capital construction? What's getting funded? I mean, that's the $1 million question. Everyone's just kind of waiting to see when they post those bills. And in the meantime, it's kind of rumors, and they usually stay pretty tight-lipped about what's in there. In terms of the emergency order funding, they're currently implementing that. So if you are a community that is in a designated emergency area, and you have a MAC, a multi-agency collaborative group, you already know kind of how much funding is coming to your region. I think you've put proposals and plans forward to get additional shelter capacity. If you are a city that's located in one of the 26 counties that's located inside what's known as the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care, also known as the balance of state, that is very quickly happening. And what the state is doing, which I think is a positive step forward, but it's feeling a little chaotic right now. They're taking the first step to stand up more focused, smaller regions, because the 26 county region is not meaningful or implementable in terms of putting funding out or planning or coordinating. So they are standing up what are called local planning groups. That may be a county, it may be a group of counties, 2 counties, it may be a single House Bill 4123 pilot, which is multiple communities. They've been doing some really quick listening sessions the last few weeks. They really want to hear from everyone. And we put out the word to every mayor and city manager in those 26 counties, just so you're aware. And maybe you've got, maybe your city's not point on this, your service provider is leading this, or maybe you're not going to be ready, or you don't have a need to come in for this initial emergency funding to stand up new shelter. These local planning groups are still going to be something that continues on going forward as additional and future funding comes around homeless response. So we just want to make sure that all cities are aware of this direction and this plan from the state, and that we will do our best to keep you updated. And as OHCS kind of builds out the state system and updates their communications, we want to make sure that you know how to stay informed and how to get that information if you want it. So that was the big takeaway I really wanted to share with folks today, is just to make sure that you were aware of this effort, and that if you don't know how to get up to date, or you have questions, please let me know and I'll get you connected to the state and to the right folks there. They have a whole new team stood up, folks that are available to have one-on-ones, to meet with you and your providers, with your county. They're there to help. So, and they're very, very accessible. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware. And then just one last piece that I didn't put on the agenda, just to be aware of in the bills that we're tracking. That's an important tie-in to any kind of emergency order implementation, whether you're in a balance of state community or one of the emergency areas. House Bill 3395 is the end of session housing package. There are a number of things in it, but there's one critical piece that we're watching closely, and that is the emergency shelter siting legislation. It basically extends what the sunset for the current law, which allows shelters to be sited quickly and administratively. Critical tool for communities to stand up shelters. It currently sunsets at the end of this month, end of June. The section, the siting legislation that's in House Bill 3395 will extend that sunset. And instead of just extending it another year, like we have in the past, it's going to actually be tied to the statewide point in time count, the unsheltered homelessness rate. So that as long as the state is at a certain percentage, this piece of legislation is still in effect. Once we kind of get out of this crisis, it will, it wouldn't apply unless we got back to there. So just, I know a lot of folks are watching that. And if you do have a shelter project happening in your community, or you think there's going to be one coming in, you're going to want to be tracking that date, and maybe thinking about ways to plan ahead for that if you might hit that gap. We think that this bill is one that's going to pass, but there's likely going to be a delay between when the legislature passes the bill and when the governor signs the bill, because it doesn't go into effect, of course, until she signs it. So we're going to be advocating for her to put that at the top of the stack. But that process also involves a certain amount of legal analysis and due diligence from the governor's office. So there may be a 2-week gap before we see that actually go into effect. So just something for folks to be aware of.
Ariel, can you state that bill number one last time?
It's House Bill 3395.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the update, Ariel. And then we're going to move on in his opening remarks about the Senate resuming floor sessions. He mentioned that one of the negotiations included some legislation regarding guns, particularly House Bill 2005. Scott Winkles is the LOC lobbyist who works on anything related to public safety. So Scott, where do we stand now with House Bill 2005? What's in, what's out, and what's the impact to Oregon cities? Ooh, you're not, we don't have audio for you, Scott. Still no audio, Scott. So I'm going to pivot while you figure out that technical issue.
Is that working?
Oh, now you're working. You're on now. So
Oh, all right then.
there you go. Magic.
Figure this out by now. The House Bill 2005, this bill passed earlier in the session out of the House on a party line vote. It did three things, one of which was of significant importance to the League of Oregon Cities, and that it would allow local governments, cities, counties, special districts to decide whether or not they want to allow firearms carried by licensed holders in their buildings. This has been a contentious issue in some cities. We have had disruptive events occur within city buildings. And I also point out the legislature elected to ban firearms in the state capitol in the 21 session, and they did so without a walkout. But unfortunately, this bill got wrapped up into the walkout negotiations. And the bill was amended yesterday in committee without hearing or discussion to remove two elements of the bill. The first was the local control piece, and the second piece was it eliminated a prohibition on persons 18, 19, or 20 years old from owning semi-automatic weapons with one exception. So now all the bill really contains is a prohibition on a person owning what's called a ghost gun, which is a firearm that a person manufactures themselves or acquires, and it doesn't have a serial number. So now it's a violation to have one of these weapons. So you get a ticket for the first offense, it's a miss the second time, and a felony the third, and that's the remainder of the bill. I think this bill, it's disappointing. This is the same thing happened with this bill in the 21 session, where local control was contained within legislation, and then it was removed in a closed door deal. I think even if your city is not interested in pursuing a prohibition on a firearm in your public buildings or adjacent grounds, the tactic and the precedent that city interests can be traded without conversation, without the courtesy of a phone call, without any public process is disturbing. And if they will do it on this, they will certainly be willing to do this with other things and have. So I would encourage cities leaders to have these conversations with their legislators, and that our interests are our interest and not something that we would give away, should be given away without our involvement. So that was very disappointing yesterday in the building. The interesting thing is that the opposition to the bill publicly had mostly been on the opposition to prohibiting people under 21 from having the semi-automatic weapons. The local control piece came in fairly late, and again, not in a public fashion. So that was one in which we were no longer in the bill. I don't see a path for getting that folded back in at this point. It's already passed this. They passed it, amended it, sent it straight to the Senate floor, and passed it back to the House for concurrence. So that's where we are.
Thanks for the update, Scott. I'm going to ask you to stay online. Last week, you've given the membership a heads up about House Bill 3013, which deals with pharmacy subsidies, which doesn't intuitively make it seem like it should impact us, but it will have a financial cost. And where are we with that? Can you remind members, in case they weren't on the call, what that pharmacy subsidy bill does? Where does it stand now? And what are we looking at before the session ends with it?
Sure. We're not in a great place on that bill currently, but it could get better. House Bill 3013, what it's intended to do is rein in pharmacy benefit managers, and in most of the bill is stuff we would not have engaged in. It's not in the interest of the League of Oregon City to if pharmacy benefit managers are licensed or that there's some or uncompetitive practices are reined in, or there's pharmacists have transparency in what they're going to get charged and some of those things. But what the bill does is it increases dispensing fees that are paid by that are going to be paid by the rate payer, the premium payer, whether it's the employer or the employee or retiree. And so right now through the CIS pool, well, actually system-wide, we see on average a dispensing fee of $2 per prescription, and that's $2 to the pharmacy for the simply pulling the medication off the shelf, labeling it, bottling it, and getting it to the consumer. Those fees would go up to about $10. In the CIS Regents pool, so City County Insurance Services, it's a self-insured pool. It's administered by Regents, but it's owned by cities and counties. That pool has 21,000 lives in it, so not a huge insurance pool by any stretch of the imagination, but it has 286,000 prescriptions in it. So you're going from $2 per script to $12. So we're seeing a $10 increase per script in costs. And this isn't a health insurance plan that's run for profit. It's run with fairly low administrative cost. It's an insurance plan that it's run as a service to the members so they can provide good health insurance, good affordable health insurance benefits to employees and their families. There's not a huge profit margin where this could be absorbed. So there's not anywhere else for that additional $2.8 million to come from other than premiums. And that'll be a premium it'll be the city's premium. My guess is most cities will have to bargain with their employees on what that cost share looks like. What's really concerning about the bill is that those health insurance rates went up by 5% last year, going into the next fiscal year. Those rates already got hit by a 5% increase. So we're already paying enough to provide health insurance. The thing about 3013 is they aimed it to PBMs, but they got the employer and the employee. And where I'm really concerned is city public insurance plans are required to make available to the retirees health coverage, so they can buy it. They can buy their health insurance from their employer. They pay full freight for the premium, but there is benefit by pooling with younger workers. Those retirees are really going to experience a cost increase if this bill goes through. Unfortunately, it did pass out of the House. It's very clear that legislators don't like pharmacy benefit managers right now. I don't think we're arguing a surplus of innocence, but that the solution would be that the employer or the employee or the retiree pay more for already expensive coverage is not viable for us. So we're asking we're asking the city leaders to to at least send this bill back to committee, pull out the damaging fiscal parts, let the rest of the bill go, where we don't have an interest, and move on. This is going to be a very expensive bill for cities and all the other employers. When Tennessee did this, they applied it just to rural pharmacies or low volume pharmacies. And they had families getting hit with $600 premium or $600 increases in prescription costs. This bill applies to all pharmacies, whether it's the Amazon pharmacy or Costco or a regional independent pharmacy. So this clearly needs more work. We're happy to discuss this in the interim, but we ask that the bill not move forward this session.
And Scott, that's House Bill 3013.
That is 3013.
And you're asking members to email their legislators and explain the fiscal impact it will have on them and their employees.
I am, and they will see an alert to that effect this afternoon.
So as costs continue to rise, ones we can't control our PERS, but we'd like to be able to have some control over health insurance, particularly this part. So if you've got time and space, please look for that action alert and give Scott some assistance so we can prohibit this fiscal impact happening in your community. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Broadband, Nolan Plesha. Nolan is our broadband lobbyist. You've seen him around a lot, but Nolan, before we actually get to the broadband piece, I think most of us woke up today and realized we're going to have to do some checking on our credit reports and maybe freeze them. So how does this cyber hack relate to some of the work you've been attempting to do this legislative session, and what would be useful for the members to know over the next few days before session ends?
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so as many of you are aware, yesterday the public was made aware of a massive data hack at the Oregon Department of Motor Vehicles, or the DMV. This hack puts information at risk for an estimated 3.5 million driver license and identification card holders. They learned about the hack on June 1st and realized that it affects about 90% of the state's driver's license and ID card files. And they've taken a few days to really kind of understand what data has been compromised. Since February 1 of this year, Oregon has experienced multiple cyber attacks across the state that include state agencies, school districts, cities, counties, special districts, as well as Lewis and Clark College. And according to a searchable database that's provided by the Oregon Department of Justice Consumers Protections website, there have been an increase of 66 data breaches that have been reported between just February 1 and June 15th of this year. So this is an incredibly serious issue, and Oregon has been lobbying throughout this session for House Bill 2049, which creates a Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. Originally, we were asking for a total of $15 million to fund both the center and provide $3.1 million in matching funds that is necessary for the federal, state, and local cybersecurity grant program. The Center of Excellence was intended to do a couple things, which is to create a program that be administered by Portland State University along with U of O and OSU, and would include additional higher educational institutions to provide cybersecurity threat assessments and analysis for local governments, as well as to create a workforce pipeline that of students that could provide these assessments, gain the essential experience while they are going to school, and create additional workforce or workers that can work in the cybersecurity space, whether it's in the public or private sector now and into the future. I think the current projections show Oregon is short about 7,500 cybersecurity workers across the state. And this is evident by the recent hack over at the DMV. Unfortunately, the legislature only decided to fund $4.9 million out of the $15 million ask. And they did not include the $3.1 million that we were asking for in matching funds, and instead only provided $250,000. That was really meant to at least set up the grant fund that the future matching fund should go into. However, we have flagged for at least the speaker's office and the governor's office staff that the next round of funding will be coming out in September. And the feds have been very clear that they will not be providing any additional waivers for matching funds. So without these matching funds, and while we don't need the entire 3.1 million for September, without these matching funds, the state will not be able to actually apply for these federal funds. We have received commitments that the legislature will look into using the e-board in September to provide the necessary matching funds so the state can actually go out and grab that federal funding. We are hopeful that they will provide the entirety of the 3.1 million, but as long as we at least have matching funds for September, we can get the second round of funding and then ask for the additional funding necessary in the 2024 short session. For those of you out there who are probably concerned for yourselves, your communities, as well as your cities on this recent data breach, we are highly encouraging Oregonians to monitor their credit reports for any signs of fraudulent activity and report any unusual activity immediately. The public should also consider freezing their credits unless they have pending applications. They can always open up those applications at any time if they're going for new loans, but with this data breach, that's something we would highly consider. In today's bulletin article, you can access, or there's a link to access free credit reports that you can do once a year. There's also some advice on how you can protect yourself from any cybersecurity threats from the Federal Trade Commission, and that is also linked in today's bulletin. We also have links to Equifax, Experience, and TransUnion for anybody that's interested in freezing their credits temporarily if they have any additional concerns. And you can find all of that in today's bulletin.
Nolan, with this attack, particularly having it happen to a state agency and it's affected essentially the entire state, what's the likelihood in the last few days of session we actually get the financial package we asked for in terms of cyber protections and matching funds? Is that even a possibility this late in the day?
I guess it's always a possibility. We can try to get some additional funding put into the Christmas tree bill. We have been told that the funding for House Bill 2049 is set for the session. I'm hopeful that, well, I'm not terribly hopeful, but I would love to see the legislature think about adding additional funds to the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence with this data breach happening. There's always that possibility, but again, I'm not terribly hopeful. The current funding at least really sets up the center. It unfortunately just limits it to PSU, U of O, and OSU instead of the additional universities or higher educational institutions. But it should at least stand up the center, get this going. We're going to continue to advocate in the short session for more funding for the center so we can at least get this set up. But the big thing, especially for local governments right now, is that we really need to make sure we get these matching funds because the state and local cybersecurity grant funding is specifically designed for local governments. So I will note that Representative Nathanson and Senator Woods have been strong advocates for this bill and for fully funding House Bill 2049. I know they, similarly to us, were very disappointed that we didn't get the full funding, but they have been our strongest advocates on this package, and they continue to advocate to get this moving forward.
Thanks, Nolan. So let's pivot back to what we did actually put on the agenda for today, which is a discussion quickly of broadband. And my understanding is we've got some surveys we still need people to complete and some action items you'd like from the membership. So what do we need to know about broadband?
Yeah, so a couple things I just wanted to lift up here for everyone. You can find more information about this in today's bulletin. As many of you are aware, Oregon can receive up to $900 million in broadband infrastructure funding from both ARPA and BEAD that has actually increased based off of current projections on the broadband maps. So that is great. We are looking to receive a lot of funding. But right now, one of the most important things that we can do is really make sure that city voices are included with the state's final plan that is necessary to get the BEAD funding. So that is what today's bulletin is about. There are 5 surveys, and they should be fairly short, that cities can fill out that will help to provide important information that they will use to write this final plan. A number of ISPs have been already weighing into this process, and we need to make sure that city voices are included. So if you have not done so, please check out today's bulletin and use the links that are included to access these surveys and make sure you're filling them out. We really need to make sure that city voices are included with how we are going to roll out this infrastructure funding. Additionally, there are 2 upcoming virtual broadband meetings with the broadband office where you can have a dialogue directly with them to address the challenges and needs that cities have for broadband. They will also provide information on how each of these programs, but this is more than just a listening session. It's an opportunity for folks to really have a good dialogue with the broadband office to make sure they understand how infrastructure is rolled out in our communities, what is actually needed, and the barriers that currently exist for us. So the first meeting will actually be on the 22nd at 10 a.m. This meeting is for community, so it is open to city officials, but it's also meant to hear from local businesses, schools, and individuals within your community. So you can put this out on social media, newsletters to get out into your community. The other thing that I have really worked to set up is a specific broadband meeting for local governments, especially for cities. So they have set that for June 29th at 10 a.m. Again, this is specifically for local governments. So I would highly encourage as many of you who are able to attend that meeting. It will also be at 10 a.m. The registration for both meetings is on today's bulletin. So make sure to check that out, register for these events, and get at least the one for the 22nd out to your community to make sure that your voices are included in this process.
Thanks, Nolan. I appreciate it. We're going to pivot now to Michael Martin. Michael, I think you've got 2 things on the agenda for us to talk about. The first is House Bill 3220, which deals with electronic recycling. My understanding is we might have some good news from some of our communities statewide on electronic recycling. And then I'm going to ask you to finish with the drought package today.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Patty. Yeah, as Patty said, we do have an update on the electronics recycling law. Effectively, this has been around a while, but it needed some updates. So just wanted to, touch base high level here. The bill actually will eliminate DEQ's annual process to set collection goals for electronic recycling. And this was really a source of instability in the program itself. And it will also increase the number of collection sites required. So how that affects us is that it will require producer responsibility organizations to ensure that 95% of residents are within 15 miles of a collection site. It will increase the number of sites required in cities with a population of 10,000 or more. And lastly, it will ensure that any willing permitted transfer station, landfill, or material recovery facility can participate as a collection site. So, if you got that, I got a dusty laptop that's just been following me around everywhere. It effectively, this program will expand those collection sites for electronic recycling for us. So that's that update. And with respect to the drought package, I wanted to bring this up again because House Bill 2010 and the -6 amendments that were passed again, this is part of the drought package. And a piece that really, I think, is going to help when we frame the $23 billion need of water, wastewater infrastructure over the next 20 years for our cities, is that there's a component in here that will provide more technical assistance through, and I realize that is a broad term, but there's the Oregon Association of Water Utilities provides a lot of technical assistance for small and very small water systems. And so this effectively in this part of the drought package will expand that, some of that service and technical help and support for addressing any needs that you have in your community. So that's it.
And do we expect the drought package to pass? Is it gonna be one of the bills that make it fully through?
Yes. And I should emphasize too, no one knows what's going to be in the other portion of it right now, which is the Christmas tree bill. So that's kind of what everybody's waiting on pins and needles for. But yes, it will pass.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, so we didn't advertise it because it just broke while we were in this session, but we do have an update on House Bill 2009. We've talked a lot about this bill. It relates to economic development incentives. Lindsay Tennis is our lobbyist who handles our economic development tax finance portfolio. Lindsay, what's the late breaking news? What do we need to know about House Bill 2009?
Hi, everyone, and thanks for adding me to the agenda last minute, Patty. So House Bill 2009, which is the Economic Development Omnibus Bill that includes, most importantly for cities, the enterprise zone extension and some policy changes there, has been scheduled for a work session Tuesday morning in the Joint Committee on Tax Expenditures. We are still waiting to see what the final amendment will look like. I think we might see a -A13 posted at some point this weekend. The most recent iteration that I had seen, which was the -8 on enterprise zones, had a mandated school fee related to a percent fee attached to the property tax savings that businesses get while they're receiving the enterprise zone benefit. I think I mentioned this last week. We have concerns with that language as we have seen it written, most notably because we think mandating a percent fee on enterprise zones reduces the zone sponsors and local government ability to negotiate other community benefits that don't just go to schools. The fee was originally said to be designed off of the SIP fee, which is a 25% of the property tax savings community service fee that goes back to other taxing districts beyond schools, so cities, counties, and schools. It's a broad community service fee. This fee is just dedicated to school districts that have schools in the enterprise zone. So yeah, we still have concerns with that language. We have been advocating for either an interim work group to work out what some sort of school or community service fee would look like, and have also been pushing a negotiable local fee that zone sponsors and the local school districts could negotiate that could potentially apply to all enterprise zone agreements. So we've still been advocating for local control instead of a mandated fee that would apply to all enterprise zone agreements. So we will see what that language ends up shaking out in an amendment to be released at some point this weekend. It's, we've kind of been following a moving target and trying to figure out what exactly legislators would like to change about enterprise zones. So if you sponsor an enterprise zone, look out for a potential action alert this weekend ahead of Tuesday's work session. Depending on what's in the amendment, we may ask folks to contact their legislators and ask for the school fee portion to be taken out. We might see an amendment that works in our favor and not send out an election alert. So we're kind of just, waiting to see what happens here, but keep an eye out for a potential email on enterprise zones this weekend. Thank you.
So hopefully Lindsay's not the only one working this weekend. She sends out an action alert. Thanks, Lindsay, for the update. We are done kind of with the opening presentation, so we're going to pivot to question and answers. Please remember, if you have a question, you can either drop it in the chat or you can raise your Zoom hand. We will go with city officials first. And we're going to ask that everybody limit their questions to one at a time. And please remember, this is an opportunity to ask a question, not an opportunity to provide a comment. We want to be mindful of that. I did see, I believe the Clatskanie City Manager, Greg Hinkleman, had posted 2 questions in the chat. The first of which I think we've already answered, Greg, which was any idea of what the capital constructional approval projects are? I think the short answer is no. It's still pretty much rumor mill. But he has asked if we can send out an email blast when those bills have dropped with the funding requests in them as a bill number. Jim, is that a possibility? Will we know when that bill drops, and can we do an action alert so cities can check to see if their requests are in there?
Yeah, we'll be happy to do that. We'll figure that out. We'll find out what the actual bill numbers are next week, because there'll be a couple of ones there where some of this stuff is going to show up at, and we'll send that out. And then I think in addition to that, we're going to take a look at our budget requests that we had all submitted as priorities going into the kind of later stages of session, that all kind of line up with those top 8 priorities that membership set for us going into the session. So we're going to have that document as soon as we get more knowledge and stuff on where some of these budget decisions are made.
Thanks, Jim. And then I believe I see the virtual hand for Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall, what's your question? You can unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm not sure if you already answered it because I had some problems getting on. This is the bill 2002, I think. They're dealing with reproductive rights. They took a bunch of stuff out. Something they had in there was about expanding abortion facilities into rural Oregon. Now, is that still in there? Did they take that out?
Jim, I don't know that, Councillor Hall, this wasn't necessarily a bill that we were particularly tracking because it doesn't impact direct city services. So Jim, do we even know the answer to that question, since it wasn't a bill we were directly following?
Yeah, my preference on something like this, where it gets into some more of those details, because this is not something that we track, is in the bulletin this week. I've got a quick wrap up on folks coming back to work. Essentially, in there are 3, maybe 4 links to media sources that you can get more details and stuff on those actual agreements, and that's probably the best place to go.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
And then there was a question in the chat from Mayor Cross of Toledo. Is the state held liable for the data breach? Mayor Cross, I'm going to take that one because we don't have our general counsel on here. That's asking a purely legal question for legal advice. We're not going to give that. If you've got some concerns or suggestions about whether or not they could be liable on your behalf, that would be a question for you to take up with your attorney. But we can't give legal advice of that nature, particularly in this particular platform. But good question. And I'm sure you're not the only one asking it. Do we have any other questions? I'm not seeing any in the chat or virtual hands, but quickly, first and foremost, the bulletin's out. This was a pretty heavy legislative update with some technical information and a lot of dates. Everything we discussed will be put in the bulletin, so feel free to look at that. One of the things, particularly for those that are smaller cities on the line, what's noted in here is that the small city allotments are open. For those of you that are small cities, you probably know what this is. There's $500 million allocated annually for local street projects, but those applications, 5 million?
5 million, not 500.
Oh, sorry, I misspoke. 5 million. Thanks for correcting me, Jim. Those applications, though, are due by June 30th. So that deadline's coming up pretty quickly if you're not already on top of it. An additional note, while I'll wait to see if we get any more questions, is that the LOC is presenting a municipal fundamentals class. That class is going to cover home rule, social media, public contracting, and how one handles difficult meetings. Those trainings are going to be held in Vail, Echo, Coquille, Forest Grove, Salem, and Redmond, and the cost is $30 per person. We will provide lunch for everybody. Third quarter small cities meetings will be kicking off here shortly. Each of those meetings will have an update from your lobbying team. It will be a legislative update to wrap up where we stand once sine die happens. Even if you are not a small city, please feel free to attend that meeting so you can get an update. You can register for any of those small city events. Registration is free. We just track it so we know how many lunches to provide on the league's website. The other thing to know is that our annual conference will be in Eugene this year in October 12th through the 14th. And while October is quite a bit away, the reality is we will open registration in less than a month on July 13th. Several of you are always interested in getting into the conference hotel, which fills out quickly. So register on July 13th. I'm not seeing any other questions. There is some information in the chat about the small city allotment deadline being listed on ODOT's website. So if you have questions or comments for us, please know that the lobbyists have put their information in the chat. Otherwise, once again, thank you for all you do for your cities and that you do in support of the league's efforts on its behalf. Mayor Cross got in at the last minute, got your hand raised. How can I help, Mayor Cross? Mayor Cross, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Still can't hear you, Mayor Cross.
How's that?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. Just wanted to remind any mayors on the call, you still have time to register for the OMA conference coming up in August at Hood River.
Okay. Thanks for the plug, Mayor Cross. So everybody have a good Friday. And we will talk to you hopefully next week. Thanks.